Over the high coast mountains and over the valleys, the great clouds marched in from the ocean. The wind blew fiercely and silently, high in the air, and it swished in the brush and it roared in the forest. The clouds came in brokenly, in puffs, in folds and gray crags, and they piled in together and settled low over the west. And then the wind stopped and left the clouds deep and solid. The rain began with gusty showers, pauses, and downpours, and then gradually it settled to a single tempo. Small drops and a steady beat. Rain that was gray to see through, rain that cut midday light to evening, and at first the dry earth sucked the moisture down and blackened. For 2 days the earth drank the rain until the earth was full. Then puddles formed, and in the low places, little lakes formed in the fields. The muddy lakes rose higher, and the steady rain whipped the shining water. At last the mountains were full, and the hillsides spilled into the streams, built into freshets, and sent them roaring down the canyons into the valleys. The rain beat on steadily, and the streams and the little rivers edged up to the banksides and worked at willows and tree roots, bent the willows deep in the current, cut out the roots of cottonwoods, and brought down the trees. The muddy water whirled along the banksides and crept up the banks until at last it spilled over, into the fields, into the orchards, into the cotton patches, where the black stems stood. Level fields became lakes, broad and gray, and the rain whipped up the surfaces. Then the water poured over the highways, and cars moved slowly, cutting the water ahead and leaving a boiling muddy wake behind. The earth whispered under the beat of the rain, and the streams thundered under the churning freshets. When the first rain started, the migrant people huddled in their tents, saying, "It'll soon be over," and asking, "How long is it likely to go on?" And when the puddles formed, the men went out in the rain with shovels and built little dikes around their tents. The beating rain worked at the canvas until it penetrated and sent streams down, and then the little dikes washed out and the water came inside, and the streams wet the beds and the blankets. The people sat in wet clothes. They set out boxes and put planks on the boxes. Then day and night they sat on the planks. Beside the tents the old cars stood, and water fouled the ignition wires, and water fouled the carburetors. The little gray tents stood in lakes, and at last the people had to move. Then the cars wouldn't start because the wires were shorted, and if the engines would run, deep mud engulfed the wheels. And the people waded away, carrying their wet blankets in their arms. They splashed along, carrying the children, carrying the very old in their arms. And if a barn stood on high ground, it was filled with people, shivering and hopeless. Then some went to the relief offices, and they came sadly back to their own people. There's rules. You gotta be here a year before you can get relief. They say the government is gonna help. They don't know when. And gradually, the greatest terror of all came along. They ain't gonna be no kind of work for 3 months.